Stad say en pedrefaj stufa dosa hasado efstayo if just dafi stafi but saf. Imagine this scene, absolute stillness. A leader bowing in prayer, and right behind him, just one step away, the muzzle of his most trusted bodyguard's gun. $5 million. That's the cold, calculated price for the life of Ibrahim Traoré. And the world had only just begun to shudder when it realized that price had almost been paid. Africa's bloody history has proven a brutal rule heroes who fight for sovereignty rarely fall before enemy bullets or invasions. No, the final blade is always in the hands of the brothers who once sat at the same table and swore to live and die together. And Burkina Faso seemed to be hurtling straight into that tragic pitfall. However, a shocking event occurred, something that went against every dark scenario the underworld forces had orchestrated. In the darkness, an offer to sell your soul was sent to the only person who had access to Traoré at all times. A vast fortune, luxury, refugee passports for the whole family, and a regal life far from the dusty red earth. The plan was cruel but simple. Wait for the moment. Traoré was completely defenseless before God and pulled the trigger. But that perfect scenario fell apart. The man refused. Why, amidst the temptation of ultimate wealth, did he choose the thorny path of dignity? That decision is the heartbeat of today's story. If your heart is moved by loyalty, don't take your eyes off the screen. Please leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel right now. Not for us, but to light the flame of dignity together. Because to understand the weight of that $5 million headshake and how it steered the fate of an entire nation, we are forced to turn back time. If this resonates with your sense of justice, don't leave. Please like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Not for us, but to keep the flame of dignity burning brightly. Because to understand why that rejection was important and why it might have changed the future direction of Burkina Faso, we have to go back to the beginning. History doesn't whisper this pattern. It shouted repeatedly. African leaders who dare to speak about sovereignty, independence, and dignity do not fall because their ideas are weak or because the people abandon them. They fell because of someone close, someone trusted, who opened the door. Tragedy has never been honed in distant capitals. It was done in familiar corridors by the shoes that had once marched beside them. That is one of the oldest political truths on this continent. Power is never taken from the outside until loyalty breaks from within. Foreign powers can design the blueprints, but execution almost always requires an insider's hand, access, proximity, a voice that can say, "Let me in. He knows me." And this is why, to understand the story of Ibrahim Traoré, we must first understand the structure of betrayal. When Patrice Lumumba was overthrown, it wasn't the Belgian army that broke down the door and stormed in during the night. Those were the soldiers under the command of Joseph Mobutu, a man Lumumba trusted so deeply that he placed the entire national army in his hands. When Thomas Sankora's final moments arrived, it wasn't a foreign assassin who dealt the fatal blow to the revolution. That was someone he called a brother, someone with whom he shared childhood memories, meals, secrets, and dreams. And as leaders across the Sahel were overthrown in the upheavals of recent decades, the first sign of collapse was never an external army. It was a change within the palace, a whispered rumor, a missing guard, a loyal person suddenly stepping aside. External intelligence networks, whether from global powers or regional adversaries, rarely act directly. They don't need to do that. Why risk a scandal, an international incident, or a war? Why break down the front gate before the back door is unlocked? Instead, they look for someone with access. Rare privileges, within reach, everyday familiarity, knowing when a leader is tired, unguarded, or deeply immersed in prayer. A personal story can be manipulated by fear, debt, ambition, or simply the desire for a different life. This is why African history is not only filled with courage, but also with unimaginable suffering. Visionaries often fall before those who hold the key. Against this backdrop of prolonged suffering, the story of Ibrahim Traoré becomes more haunting than ever. From the moment he emerged as the leader of Burkina Faso, analysts noted that he entered a political environment fraught with tension, regional instability, internal competition, and decades-long external interests. According to multiple sources, he is one of the most targeted African leaders today. Not once, not twice, but over 18 separate plots involving coups, infiltration, attempts manipulation within institutions, and plans for attacks during public gatherings. Most leaders don't survive even once. And yet here is a man in his early 30s carrying the weight of an entire nation while navigating the minefield of hidden agendas. Why has Ibrahim Traoré become a central figure in this dangerous context? Some people point to his criticism of foreign influence. Others emphasize the geopolitical importance of Burkina Faso in the Sahel. There are still others who note the symbolic weight of a young captain speaking openly about sovereignty in a world where such words are often accompanied by consequences. Whatever the reason, the pressure surrounding him is immense, both from outside and from within. And this brings us back to the character at the heart of our story, the bodyguard who refused to be subdued. Before the world knew about the $5 million offer, before whispers and warnings spread across the continent, before the story reached city streets and rural radio stations, there was a moment, a quiet, private moment, when a man's loyalty was tested in a way few have to face. But before we go any further, let me stop here. Before we continue, I have a small request. Please leave a comment starting with the word thank you. It could be thank you, Traoré. It could be thank you, Burkina Faso. Or it could simply be thank you for dignity and the future. These are not empty words. They are seeds of encouragement. Every thank you write will become part of the harvest of hope. Show the world that there are still people who believe in pride, sovereignty, and tomorrow. Take this moment, type your thanks, and let it grow with us. Now that gratitude has been expressed, let us return to the shadows. He has no name, is not honored in official records, and is unknown to international organizations and political commentators. And yet, across the African continent, people speak of him with a mixture of respect, awe, and quiet admiration. He is the man standing an arm's length away from the president. The man saw the fatigue that others didn't notice. The man knew the pauses in Traoré's speech, the moments he bowed his head, the breaths he took before praying. He is a man whose loyalty does not crumble under the weight of money escape or the promise of a life far from the heat and dust of Burkina Faso. But loyalty doesn't only shine in the light. It shines brightest when compared to the betrayals that came before. And to truly understand the significance of what this bodyguard refused, we must go back to the earlier wounds of history. Because before the $5 million offer was put on the table, Africa had lived through betrayals that shattered revolutions and leaders whose greatest enemies were right beside them. The approach doesn't come with fanfare. It came the way betrayal always does, silently. There were no dramatic meetings in dimly lit rooms, no envelopes sliding across polished tables, no cinematic exchanges under flickering streetlights. Instead, it began with a whisper, passed through intermediaries whose names would never be recorded. A message slipped from shadow to shadow until it reached the man who was closer to Ibrahim Traoré than anyone else in the world. The bodyguard, the man whose footsteps were so synchronized with the president's that they sounded like an echo. Someone stood behind Traoré not for rank or fleeting glory, but because he had earned trust measured in years, not days. And one evening, the world didn't know exactly when he was contacted. Everything happened so simply it was heartbreaking. $5 million full foreign citizenship for him and every member of his family. A new life is promised in a distant land, far from the red soil of Burkina Faso. Protection, anonymity, and a life of luxury in exchange for a single act, a gentle fingerprint, a moment of silence, a brutal betrayal at the weakest moment a man can experience. The order was delivered with a chilling precision. Wait until Traoré bows his head in prayer. When his forehead touched the ground, when he was no longer a president, no longer a soldier, no longer a symbol of defiance for a nation, but simply a devout worshiper. In that sacred quiet moment, they said, "Let's do it." It's hard to imagine a request darker than that. Prayer is the only space where power steps aside, where all armor is shed, where the heart speaks without fear. For many Muslims, prayer is not just a ritual, it is a refuge. It's the moment the world softens and the soul breathes. Attacking at that moment was not simply killing a man, it was the ultimate betrayal of trust. Because he was the closest person saw Traore when he was completely defenseless, knew his habits, posture, rhythm, how he lowered his shoulder before the first prayer, and could act without raising any alarm. Foreign intelligence, or whoever orchestrated this approach, understood one fundamental thing. No outsider can get close enough. No soldier from afar can dispel doubt. No stranger can enter that sacred radius around the president. Only someone he trusted absolutely could deliver the fatal blow. But faith in this story isn't a weakness. It's the shield. Because the man they chose wasn't bent. When the offer was placed before him, many imagined he would hesitate. $5 million is not small change. It's life-changing for an entire family, a door to a comfortable life beyond imagination. Add to that, foreign passport, something many African families struggle their entire lives to obtain, and the temptation becomes overwhelming. But he didn't hesitate. He asked another question, one that exposed the entire psychology of that filthy offer. Would $5 million make me a king in their foreign land when their own sons and daughters would mock me as a fool? It's a saying distilled from years of witnessing how Africans are often treated abroad with prejudice, humiliation, and both subtle and overt racism. It's a steely affirmation that wealth cannot buy dignity in a place that refuses to recognize your humanity. He understood something that many people didn't grasp. A wealthy outsider is still just an outsider, but a man of dignity is a king in his own land. He refused. It's not because he doesn't know fear, it's not because he's perfect, but because loyalty has become part of his identity, his very being. A loyalty shaped by the land ancestors' pride and an unwavering belief that some things cannot be bought with money. News of the failed bribery attempt initially spread quietly within a small group inside the security apparatus. Then it infiltrated the political circles in Ouagadougou, whispered about with a mixture of skepticism and respect. Soon ordinary citizens began discussing it in markets, cafes, and on dusty park benches. A child in northern Burkina Faso is said to have repeated the story to their mother, saying, "Mom, the shield said no." On a continent where so many leaders have fallen because someone close said yes, this no feels like a miracle. A single rejection has become a powerful rallying cry. Please take a moment to share with us where you are watching this video. Is it from Africa, from Europe, from the Americas, or from a village whose name deserves to be proclaimed with pride? Let us know. Because every place is important. The Pan-African Revolution wanted to thank you personally and send a message across the distance. May freedom and dignity walk with you wherever you are. Let comments be not just words, but bridges of unity. In the hours after turning down the offer, the bodyguard knew he had put himself in a dangerous position. Rejecting such a plan is not simply shutting the door, it's painting a target on yourself. But he didn't run away. He still stands firm in his position. He remained by Traore's side, not out of fear, but with unwavering faith. And that belief brought something else to light, a truth easily forgotten in the chaos of politics. A revolution can be destroyed by betrayal, but it can also be protected by loyalty. His refusal proved that African history is not doomed to repeat itself. It shows that the chain of betrayals that took the lives of people like Sankara and Lumumba is not unbreakable. This time, the man closest to the leader chose a different path. This time, the story took a different turn. But history is a long mirror. And to understand why this moment is so deeply significant, we must look at the tragedies that came before. Because loyalty allowed Traore to shine brighter than ever when compared to friendships that crumbled under the weight of power and foreign influence. Long before the $5 million offer was made, Africa had witnessed the heartbreak of leaders ruined not by enemies, but by those they trusted most. Before Traore's shield stood firm, before that $5 million offer turned to dust, Africa endured a pain so profound that it still echoes across the continent today. That's the story of Thomas Sankara, a man who believed loyalty was sacred friendship, a covenant and brotherhood could survive the storms of power. It was a story that began with hope burned brightly and ended in deadly silence. Thomas Sankara and Blaise Compaoré did not meet as rivals or wary officers in a military barracks. They met as young boys, children who shared dusty roads, laughter, and the atmosphere of the countryside. When Blaise lost his father, it was Sankara's father who stepped in, offering guidance and protection. The two became inseparable. They trained together, ate from the same plate, moved like comrades on the same front, and formed a bond that seemed unbreakable. Sankara later described him not as a colleague, not as an ally, but as a brother, the kind of brother proverb speaks of, a friend who is closer than a sibling. For Sankara, loyalty is not a strategy. It is an identity. It's not a political tool. It's a moral obligation. But the higher Sankara rose, the tighter the pressure around him became. Revolutionary ideas threaten outdated networks. His stance on sovereignty, dignity, and independence unsettles those who benefit from the status quo. Rumors began to reach his bodyguards, intercepted documents, suspicious messages, illogical movements, meetings held in closed rooms. Everything is about a single name, Blaise Compaoré. And yet Sankara refused to accept that. His bodyguards approached him with extreme urgency, pleading, "Mr. President, let us arrest him. We have evidence." But Sankara looked at them as if they had asked him to betray his own flesh and blood. He shook his head, not out of fear, but out of blind faith. He said, "I will never betray friendship. If he wants to overthrow me, let him come out in the open." It is one of the most tragic statements ever uttered in the history of African politics. When Ghana's intelligence agencies uncovered a darker truth that Compaoré not only plotted to eliminate Sankara, but also planned to end his life, they acted swiftly. President Jerry Rawlings, shocked by the reports, called Sankara privately. He offered assistance. He suggested protection. He requested resources to neutralize the threat. But Sankara's answer remained unchanged. He said Blaise was his friend. While other nations have witnessed revolutions ruined by the very hands that were supposed to protect them, Burkina Faso has witnessed something far rarer. A choice that stems not from fear or ambition, but from unwavering loyalty. Burkina Faso embodies many things at once: a land of fierce resilience, a nation navigating instability, and a people striving for dignity, despite the surrounding storms. It carries the weight of regional conflict, the watchful eyes of powerful forces, and the internal pressures that accompany any political transition. And at the heart of this tumultuous picture stands Ibrahim Traoré, a young leader whose rise has astonished the world, whose words ignite fiery debates, and whose stance on sovereignty has placed him at the center of global attention. For some, he embodies hope. For others, it's uncertainty. But above all, he represents a turning point in the political rhythm of the Sahel region. Many commentators tried to decipher Traoré's survival by analyzing ideology, foreign policy, military strategy, or political reforms. But these explanations missed the truth that was right behind him. It wasn't policy that kept him standing. It's not about age, and it's not about charm. It was the presence of a man whose name the world did not know. The bodyguard whose loyalty never wavered when tested. The solid shadow that rejection has become a barrier against the repetition of history. In a place where so many African leaders were overthrown by their closest companions, Traoré was protected by his own people. The bodyguard's refusal of the $5 million offer is more than just a detail in a political play. It was an iconic crack that broke through a seemingly impenetrable pattern. It's a reminder that history doesn't move in a straight line, that a nation's soil can nurture new possibilities when cared for by hands that refuse to betray it. His decision is not merely political. It's deeply human, a person choosing dignity over comfort, belonging over exile, principle over wealth. In that choice, Burkina Faso gained more than just a century. It received a message that loyalty can still exist, that sovereignty can still be protected, and that storms of interference or ambition do not always prevail. If betrayal has shaped so many chapters of African history, perhaps it is loyalty, genuine, incorruptible, and unforced, that will shape the unwritten ones. You can see it on the faces of young people from Burkina Faso as they talk about their homeland with pride. You can hear it in the voices of older people saying this time things feel different. You can feel it in the quiet way this story has crossed borders, languages, and generations. Loyalty is not noisy. It's sturdy. It is the hand that holds the line steady when the world is tilting. It's a shield that doesn't sparkle, but is durable. What happened in Burkina Faso was more than just a security incident. It was a moment that forced us to ask deeper questions. What does it truly mean to protect a nation? What does true sovereignty require? And can loyalty, true loyalty, become the foundation for a new political culture in Africa? These questions don't have simple answers, but they are important because the future of Burkina Faso, and perhaps the future of leadership across the continent, may depend on how they are resolved. And before we conclude, there's one thing we must reflect on. It's not a detail from the past, but a call to action for the future. It began with a moment of gratitude, a spark of pride, and a choice about the journey ahead. Before we conclude, let us pose a question. What you have just experienced is not merely a story about politics, nor is it a tale told for drama or sensationalism. It is a reminder, a quiet but firm reminder, that dignity is not an accident and sovereignty is not a gift. They are choices. The choices were made in the dark. The choices were made under pressure. The choices made by ordinary people whose names may never be recorded in history. The bodyguard standing behind Ibrahim Traoré didn't simply refuse $5 million. He rejected a future built on exile, a future shaped by the designs of others. His choice was a seed sown in the soil of courage.
And from that seed grew a harvest of possibilities.
For Burkina Faso, for Africa, for anyone who believes that loyalty still matters in a world built on transactions. Moments like these don't come along often. They demand something from us. If this story has stirred something within you, a sense of justice, a pride, a desire for a future defined by dignity rather than dependence, then I invite you to join this journey. Not as an audience member, not as a passerby, but as a companion walking the road ahead. Please subscribe to this channel. It's not about the numbers, not about the algorithms, but because we are building a space where independent voices are celebrated, where history is remembered with clarity, and where the future is envisioned with courage. Let this place be the torch we pass from hand to hand, the light illuminating the thorny path to independence, a reminder that sovereignty is our flesh and blood, and loyalty is our iron armor. Come with us for a new chapter is about to begin. Real history isn't written with flashy speeches. It was decided in the shadows by suffocating decisions, in narrow corridors by silent headshakes, in the face of the 1,000-pound weight of temptation. The story of the $5 million is that life or death moment. It exposes the brutal face of power in Africa, rubbing salt into the old wounds of Sankara and Lumumba, those who fell not to foreign bullets, but to the knives of those they once called brothers. Countries that once tasted freedom only to be dragged back into darkness by their own people. But in Burkina Faso today, that bloody scenario has been torn apart. An anonymous soldier, without the need for a monument, single-handedly broke the curse of betrayal that has plagued this continent. He rejected glory, refusing to let fear or greed dictate the fate of the leader whose life he had sworn to protect. It was thanks to that extraordinary choice that Ibrahim Traoré is still alive. It was thanks to that moment that he still carried on his shoulders the aspirations for self-determination of an entire nation rising up. What does this mean? Burkina Faso is facing a new destiny not because of empty slogans, but because loyalty has endured where treachery once reigned. The road ahead will be full of pitfalls and tears. The price of freedom has never been cheap, but that path is now brighter and more solid, all because one man refused to sell himself. The lesson is harsh, but great policies can change, but only absolute loyalty can save a nation. And we end where we began, a sacred prayer, a silent shadow behind the president, and a decision to save everything. Burkina Faso is moving forward, carrying the scars of the past as baggage. And the whole world is holding its breath watching because they know history is still listening to this heartbeat.